Welcome everyone to another episode of Parenting in the Far North. I am your host, Ariane Aramburo. Today's guest is Brianna Gray, a dedicated mother, community advocate, and passionate voice on parenting with authenticity and intention. She is originally from King Cove, Alaska, currently resides in North Pole. She has 2 children and 3 fur babies and strives to connect both her Indigenous and Black cultures and believes in meeting kids where they're at every stage in their lives. So please welcome to the podcast, everyone, Brianna Gray. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk about family, love, parenting.
All things parent that come under the parenting umbrella. Well, before we kind of get into our topics, tell us a little bit more about yourself. You're from King Cove and some of your family roots and your family ties there.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm originally from King Cove. I moved from there when I was young and moved to Anchorage, the big city. And it was such a life change for me because my mom used to make a joke like, you guys did not know how to live in the city. You guys were just running around crazy because we had such a beautiful life in the village. And we do still have family that lives there, that lives in Anchorage. And now we live in North Pole, Alaska, where my mom moved us up here when she met her now husband and got a job at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And so I say we've had such a blessed life to just experience different cultures. So my dad's from Louisiana. And so we've got to travel back and forth there and learn about his culture as well. So it's been so fun to not only learn about my culture for me, but also to share that experience with my children and learning about other cultures as well. So we make an intentional effort just to learn about the communities that we're in, the people that we surround ourselves with. So I feel like it's just very important that our kids have a different perspective, and that creates a better, I guess for me, seeing my kids grow, create a better way to critically think and engage with individuals.
Well, I want to talk about parenting and building relationships. This is one of the topics that we'll dive into. So you've spoken about the importance, obviously, of building relationships with your children at kind of every phase in their lives. How has that evolved for you and as your kids have grown? And how old are they?
Oh my gosh, yes. So my daughter is 12 and my son just turned 11 in February. And oh my goodness, when you become a parent, nobody tells you about the grief processes you go through as they go through different phases in their life. And so when my kids started getting out of the baby phase into a toddler phase and continuing on, I had like a full year of grief. I'm like, who are these people? I don't even know who they are. I don't understand what's happening. I miss the babies that I had.
Yeah.
And it was very, very serious to me. And then as I started getting into school, things changed even more. And I just kept learning, like, you really have to learn who these people are, because they are people, right? Like, yes, they are my babies. I absolutely love them. But I really wanted to make sure that if I take my authenticity as important as I do, that I also get to know them in their authenticity and who they are continuing to be, their interests, showing a vested interest in it. I'm reading this book right now by Bell Hooks on the exploration of love. And she redefines it as more than just a feeling and emphasizing that it's an active practice. And she talks about 6 essential things about love. And one is care, demonstrating that through nurturing and support, commitment, and a deliberate and consistent effort. And then knowledge, coming from a genuine curiosity and acceptance, responsibility, understanding love's power, respect, valuing and honoring one another, and then trust, building that through vulnerability and gentle understanding. And all of those things, I say, really contributed to me not only taking care of myself and loving myself, but learning how to take care and love my children as they do continue to go through those stages. My son, when he went into kindergarten, he had such a difficult time, which was so different than what my daughter did. She is such a social person and everyone just loved her. And I couldn't figure out, I was like, you know what? I'm not getting to know him on the level that I've gotten to know my daughter, and understanding that there's difficulties. Love isn't going to always be easy. And so we were able to take the necessary steps to get to know one another, and learn our own differences that we have, learn how we want to be loved, right? People always say, love people how you want to be loved. But no, I truly believe in loving people how they want to be loved. And that means you have to compromise and learn who they are, which is much more difficult, right? And so we have done a lot of intentional time in setting boundaries setting our schedules, knowing when we need our alone time, because that is also important that we absolutely love each other, but we also need our alone time so we can get to know who we are, what our needs are, so we can verbally communicate that.
Well, what advice do you have for parents who may feel that disconnection from their children and kind of want to rebuild that bond, maybe have no idea of where to begin?
I think the first thing for me that was really important is understanding that it's not all about us. um, there are things that can trigger us as parents, that can trigger us as people that we see in these cycles that have happened in our families, or we see parts of ourselves in our children. So realizing that it's not about us, that they are their own human beings, and simply just being. It doesn't have to be this expensive thing. You don't have to go out and spend all this money to build connections. The most important thing that I've seen when I've asked my kids what their favorite things to do have been, it's been us just going for a walk, going for a drive, spending time in the living room. One of the things that I love is that we are a living room family and we sit together, we eat together, and we talk together. But the most important thing that I found in talking with my kids and getting to know them and engaging with them is not talking at them, but genuinely listening and understanding that not everything needs a response, but curiosity is something that's really important. So if I see that my son has asked me a question about, hey, do robots have belly buttons? Right. I'm like, oh, maybe he likes science. And so then we
Yeah.
talk about those things, and no matter how ridiculous it sounds. And so I would say sitting, listening, and talking with, not at.
Well, what does it mean to you to remain authentic as a parent? And also, how do you balance that with societal or maybe even family expectations?
Something that I always grew up with was that you are just way too much, that I am like super annoying because I'm way too much. Um, I'm somebody who has always really critically thought about things, and doesn't, just take a side because I hear something. And I didn't realize how difficult that was going to be, raising kids who are authentic, because sometimes adults aren't prepared for that, right? And
Mhm.
so people always talk about how wild our family is. We love to dance. We're just so outgoing, and we really communicate well with one another. And I say by being my authentic self and my kids seeing that I am not just what society says a mother should be, like this really straight, clean way of
Mhm.
acting and how you behave and going out and doing things to have fun. Um, my kids have then really looked into their creative side and looking outside of what society tells you need to do. And my kids have done so many cool things. My daughter and my son have taken belly dancing classes together, aerial silk classes together, cooking classes together. And so just understanding that society is going to tell you who you should be based on what you look like or where you come from, but you can do whatever you want to do. You can go have fun. You can go hiking outside. You can love rap music. You could also like polka music. You can like all these different things. And if it brings you joy, that's what it is supposed to be, bringing joy to our lives. And that also means standing up to one another and saying, hey, that didn't bring me joy, so I don't want to participate in that. Or you guys go ahead and do that. I need to take a break over here. And so by me being authentic and communicating my needs, my boundaries have allowed them to feel safe in doing so as well. So there's that emotional safety, physical safety, and spiritual safety that we are continuing to build, because it does come in waves. It's not perfect.
Oh, yeah, I tell you, there's no, the rule book to parenting. Whoever can come up with one, let us know, because it's all different. It is a learning experience in itself. So, what are some of the biggest lessons that your children have taught you about being a parent?
Oh my goodness, that sometimes I need to be quiet and I need to listen. That there are things that they're interested in, and it's not something that I could force on them. My daughter, she loves soccer. None of us have ever played soccer, and I remember being like, are you sure you don't want to do this, right? And I was totally trying to gear her towards something that I grew up on because it's fun for me. And she stood her ground and said, hey, that's cool for you, that's not cool for me. Maybe I'll try it if I'm interested. And so I would say, as my son has also, when he, I kind of talked about when he was in kindergarten, he was having some things going on. We actually ended up putting him in occupational therapy. And I learned that there were so many neuro divergent things about me that I didn't realize were really impacting my well-being and just my quality of life, that we worked through together and learned about one another. And then my daughter participated in it. And we also brought his cousin into some of the occupational therapy. times. And so my family as a whole, we've been really able to build this community of support for my son to be able to understand that he has very different needs than what we have ever had to manage within our own family, because it's something that we never really talked about. And now it's like an open conversation, and my son's able to advocate for himself, and my daughter feels safe advocating for herself. And we've all learned that as we continue to grow, there will be things that we need to adjust to. And we always talk about how there's this balance in life. I'm a student, I'm a mom, my kids are doing all these extracurricular activity things, but also understanding that balancing really isn't like this. It's like a bicycle. You're trying to go forward and trying to find that balance. And so we always talk about, we always have to sacrifice something to be able to balance out our life and the way to move forward. And we've just learned that through that is just community building. I am a single parent in a household, and so I have a really strong community around me that takes a lot of communication. It takes a lot of asking for help and getting to know one another to understand our needs.
Have you ever felt, that there's been moments to where you felt pressured to parent in a certain way, maybe particularly being a single parent?
You know, I've had a lot of individuals, especially in public, like say things directly to my kids about their maturity and how they communicate to adults and how they speak up for themselves. And there have been times where I felt, oh man, maybe it would be safer if we talk about having things only in the household, right? Or not standing up for yourself out in public. And they always do it respectfully, but sometimes adults don't appreciate that or aren't used to that, or even just having conversations with kids. I remember one of our community members had come up to me and they're like, wow, when your kids talk to you, they talk to you. They don't want to just say a hi and bye. They want to get to know you. And that's rare in kids. But I just kind of sat back and said, the whole purpose of me being a parent and being here is so that if something, whenever I'm gone, that they feel like they can support themselves in our community and build strong relationships. And that's what they're doing now. And so I feel like it's hard. It's always hard. You kind of feel like you want to dive into that pressure, but it's also very hard to deep surface act and not feel like yourself, right? And then it takes years to try to figure out who you are as you continue to get older. And I want them to feel comfortable and getting to know who they are and loving themselves so that they can live with internal peace.
Yeah. And, how do you balance supporting, your children's personal interests, which you mentioned some things that they're into, maybe things that they're not into, but also maintaining time for yourself? I talk to a lot of moms, even in parents, dads too, but particularly moms, about keeping their cup full. How do you do that?
So I think, well, first, I really like my kids, so I enjoy spending time with them.
Well, that's good. That's good.
And so I have to also realize they need a break from me. My daughter was like, you're a backpack mom. You're a backpack mom. But something that I find really important is that I have my alone time, but then I also have alone time with them individually. So I'll set up dates with them and work out a schedule with my friends and family, or I'll see if there's something happening in the community. Like today, they're at UAF for spring break camp, and I get to clean by myself. I get to just sit and be and just maybe eat a girl mom dinner and just sit there with my popcorn and my soda, and that's my lunch and dinner for the day, right? And so for me, just filling up my cup also means taking time just to do nothing. As parents, sometimes we're like, man, there's that laundry, there's these dishes. But for me, it's important to build a schedule and then building out time where I don't have to do anything, because there's a lot of mental space that's being taken up and having a demanding job, being a student, being a parent, and then also just wanting to have fun with your family and friends, right? So for me, doing nothing and then also providing that opportunity for my kids. There are many times where I say, hey, we're going to schedule some do nothing time for all of us. So where do you want to be when you're doing that do nothing time? Whether it's Barnes and Noble, whether it's out on a trail, but just figuring out what is needed at that time is really important. And the ocean's really important to us. So we try to make sure we get there once a year as well.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll start to see some this winter activity. Summer is just around the corner, so getting outside is key. Brianna, many parents, strive to kind of break the cycles that they've experienced in their own upbringing, whatever that looks like for them. So what are some cycles that were important for you to break, and how have you been able to do that?
I think for me, it has been just communicating the hard stuff. As much as we want to protect our kids from all of the things, we have to understand that things are going to happen, and we can either be that emotional safety, or we can be the individuals who are so triggered by that response that because we haven't talked about things that have happened in our own lives. So for me, it's been that open, honest communication. I remember I had a screenshot on my phone I was showing to somebody, and there was a little blurb of my daughter saying, "I can't wait to talk to you when I get home. So many things happened today." And that adult was like, they want to talk to you when they get home. And I just thought, like, man, we are breaking cycles. But then also understanding that breaking cycles means that there's sometimes some tensions that happen within your own family or in your own friend circle or in your own community, because those are hard things for not just yourself. When you're breaking cycles, it's not just your own story or your own cycle, it's everybody around you as well. And so for me, the biggest thing is communication, because communication in a healthy way isn't something that we've seen. And then also just making sure that I am being healthy in the sense that I have been around a lot of substance, drug, and alcohol abuse. And it's been really important for me to talk to my kids about it from the get go, saying, hey, this is a part of something that I grew up in, and there are generational traumas that happen, and there are things that you see in our different families. And it's also something that has impacted your father's side of the family. And so it's something that I've been really striving and being open about, the impacts of what that looks like, especially in today's world where there are so many different options that are just really going through our community and harming our community. And so understanding that communication is the basis of all things, and then also understanding and saying, I don't even know the answers to that.
Yeah.
When we're breaking cycles, like, we are learning this together, kind of like the neurodivergent process that we went through with my son. Is we have always put something like that on the back burner because it's something that you don't talk about, right? Like, oh, they say back in my day, we just did this and you toughened up and you got over it. Well, I believe in having healthy, open conversations so that we understand what the emotions that we're having and that we can process them and we can build stronger relationships with ourselves and then be better for our community.
And, flipping that question, are there any traditions or values from your own upbringing that you are wanting to pass down to your kids and something that you want them to kind of carry on?
Absolutely. So something that we've been learning together is our Unangan language. And so we are from King Cove, where on the Aleutian Islands, right in the middle. And I started learning our language a few years ago. And there were certain words I didn't even know in English when we moved to the city. And it was an interesting transition. But that is something that has been really important for me, to make sure that my kids understand. And it's not a forceful thing. It's, we're including daily words that are becoming normal. And as they continue to get older, I know they'll show more interest. So it's not really forcing them. But then our traditional foods too. Like I said, my dad's from Louisiana, and I went and got a king's cake, and we talked about that whole tradition, and we talk about how we prepare traditional foods. And so we belong to so many different cultures that, for me, if there's little pieces that I can take from it that I enjoyed as a child, but then also new ones that we want to also enjoy as well. One of the things that my daughter just said, hey, every year a tradition we need to have is me and my brother go on a date. It's like a big old prom for them. They go on their own little date, they decide what it is, and that's their own tradition that they formed. That is absolutely beautiful. But engaging in all parts of our culture, and again, learning about the cultures of our community, is something that's just really important to us.
And you talked a little bit about growing up. You mentioned your family, your dad's side, you said, is from Louisiana, correct?
Yes.
Well, my mom and dad are both from New Orleans, so there's that connection.
Oh, look at that!
Yes, gumbo, jambalaya, all of it. So that piqued my interest there. You also talked about, too, in an article I read, merging your Indigenous and the Black culture for not only yourself but for your kids. What's that been like? And especially being in King Cove, Alaska. A lot of folks think Alaska, we're kind of off the beaten path, rural. What has that been like? And do you think it would be different if maybe you were in kind of like a more densely populated area or big city, so to speak?
I think so. So when I grew up in the village, there weren't many Black people there, honestly. And I didn't even realize that I was Black until somebody had told me, because I grew up so heavily just diving into our Indigenous culture that we didn't really talk about it. But when I found out that I was Black, it wasn't a positive experience. Like, I knew I looked different. I knew that my skin color was different. But the way that I learned about how some people feel about Black people was really harmful. And I didn't really have anybody to process that with. Um, and so then I went to Anchorage, and then nobody saw me as Indigenous. They look at me and they're like, oh, that is a Black girl right there. So I was treated very differently. And it was really confusing for people to see how I behaved and but how I looked. And they couldn't figure out, they kept telling me, like, you need to pick a side. You need to figure out what's happening. And I really used that kind of as an ammo to dive deeper into my culture. And I remember doing an assignment on the similarities and differences between where my dad was from and where I'm from. And there were so many similarities. It was so amazing. And it was so cool to see the differences as well. But it really just allowed me to better understand the importance of digging in and learning about yourself so others can't tell you about who you are, and that you can be deeply rooted and engaged in all parts of who you are. And one of the things that me and my sister did was we went to Essence Fest. And it was such a beautiful experience because I thought, as we continue to learn about one another and we learn about other people,
Mhm.
and then to just celebrate Black excellence as we celebrate our Indigenous culture when we're here, it has been such a spiritually fulfilling way of just getting to dive deeper in ourselves, but then to learn about one another, all my close friends. And then I just can't wait to take my kids, take them to Essence Fest, go travel and learn about different things, because I did have a negative experience initially learning about who I am and how society could possibly feel about me. Obviously, it's not all people, but I also didn't have the support system to really navigate those emotions and talk through it. And so, something that my kids and I talk about all the time is just specifically that. What it was like living in the village and then going to Anchorage and then moving here, and that there are Black people here,
Yeah.
and we do
Yeah.
celebrate so many amazing things in our community. And one of my good friends just held a Black Expo here in Fairbanks, and there was recently one in Anchorage. And there's so many awesome things to not just for only Black people to experience, for our entire community to experience and get to know about one another.
And I feel like nowadays, and you may agree, it's not just black and white anymore. I mean, Alaska in general is just a melting pot of cultures and nationalities. So, really nowadays in 2025, kind of wondering what someone is, it's, everybody's everything.
Yes, when I travel, I mean, it is crazy. When I'm in New York, people think I'm from somewhere else. If I'm in California, people think I'm from somewhere else. So for me, it has been so fun to travel and then learn about one another and just what people think. I don't get offended easily, but then also the just connection that it builds in talking about, like, oh, I'm from here, you're from here. This is what we know about our culture. We would love to learn this more. And yeah, there's so many different parts of us and who we are. And it's just important to just build that connection. Connection is everything.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. If you could give one piece of advice to parents striving to build stronger relationships with their kids, what would you say to that?
Build a stronger relationship with yourself and be intentional with it. Again, there's a book by Bell Hooks who talks about love and just talks about reframing love as a deliberate and ongoing process rather than a fleeting emotion. And so really building a relationship with yourself and understanding that love is an action, and just that combination of care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect, and trust within yourself means that you have to also have the same with your children and understand that they are their own little human beings that we are loving to be in our communities as adults one day. And so that means we also have to love ourselves.
And kind of a follow up piggyback to that question, what's one thing that you wish more parents did understand about the journey of just raising kids in general?
That is never going to be easy. And that is not just a forward movement process, right? When we think of success or we think of forward movement, we think of it just as linear going up, but that it is a wild roller coaster and that there are things that we're not going to have control over. And so really diving deep into who we are and building who we are in order to show that we can be authentic and confident in our children, that we have to have just some levelness within our own lives to understand that parenting is not straightforward, and that is totally okay. So be open to learning, and being open to diving deeper into yourself.
How do you hope that your children remember their childhood and your role as their mom in it?
I hope that they feel like they had emotional, physical, financial, spiritual safety. Those things are all very important to me, and that they had a home that feels like a home and enough flexibility and safeness to ask questions, to learn who they are, so that they can feel confident and authentic in their own shoes.
So is Alaska home for you guys, or do you plan to see yourself, ever moving? Because I've never been to King Cove. So how do you describe that to someone when they find out that's where you're from or where you grew up?
It's so funny because I always say it's an island, y'all. Island, an island girl. I love the ocean, healthy food. I didn't have a lot of processed food until I moved. And so we always just talk about the importance of taking care of our land, and making sure that we take care of the land, it'll take care of us, and that we have a healthy way of being, not only with our food, but our language and ways of being. Um, what was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, how would you describe to someone about where you live, how you grew up? Like you mentioned, you travel a lot, and that questions has come up. And do you plan to stay in Alaska? Is this home for you?
Oh, yes. So this is home for us. We talk about that all the time. I bought a house close to my mom on purpose. And we plan on being here, but also traveling the world. I know that my kids also talk about, they're so young right now, but they love sports and that they want to go to college and they want to possibly go to college outside of Alaska for sports. And I totally get that. And so I do know that home will always be here, but that we are always open to experiencing and traveling. That is the beautiful part about life, is learning. And so home will be here, but we will be also building little parts of our home elsewhere as well as they continue to grow.
Those are all my questions I had for you. I love to end my podcast by giving my guests kind of the last and final say, or if there's anything that you want to share, mention that I didn't ask. Is there anything else that you would like to mention or share for any of those that are watching and listening?
Yeah, just thank you for being here. And then to also, just to all parents, man, we are all doing the best that we can with what we have, and that we are doing amazing jobs. And the biggest thing, don't hesitate to ask for help. Asking for help is one of the most important things that we can do as parents to understand and really give our kids a place of healing and a healthy way of being. Ask for help.
Thank you so much for being one of our guests here on our podcast. I appreciated it, and some great advice there that you had.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And I also want to thank everyone for listening to another episode of Parenting in the Far North. Don't forget to like and subscribe.